I come from a community of farmers and fishermen. People were fishing to survive. As a child growing up, there was no fish being brought from outside the community. Today, there is not a single person in our community who you can describe as a professional fisherman because there is no fish to depend on.
This share of paradise, the delta of my birth, reels from an immeasurable wound. Barrels of alchemical droughts flow from this earth to the unquestioning world that lights up its life in a blind trust. The inheritance I sat on for centuries now crushes my body and soul.
We have enough wealth. How many thousand barrels of oil like this siphoning from our land every day? And how much is coming to us? Nothing.
The oil companies themselves are not willing to come and sit down. At this moment, they make fantastic profit that nobody knows about. They produce the oil, they report to government, they sell the oil, and government sits down in Abuja only to receive the profit.
A lot of the money that is being generated from the oil revenue is being shared by people who are in power and their cohorts. At the moment, there is too much of official corruption that is going on. If the government cannot even address matters as basic as water to drink, sanitation, public education, then of course it's difficult.
No water, no light, no road. People are dying every day because of oil exploration.
The Niger Delta people have been denied their rights to property. No Niger Delta person can lay claim that that piece of land given to him by his ancestors is his as of right, because the government had put in place a decree that says that property, that land, that forest, that river no longer belongs to the person because they want to take control of oil and gas. Kensaru had mobilized his people to say no to pollution, to say no to degradation, to say no to injustice. It is that shout of no, that resistance, that the federal government will not want to tolerate. And that was why they hanged him.
things have gotten worse since Sarajevo was murdered.
The law doesn't say that because you have the permission of the federal government to exploit for oil, it still does not permit you to pollute my environment.
If Shell, Ajib, Elf, Chevron are allowed to be businesses and we hold them accountable for any ecological violence or moral interruption, the communities can go to court and get justice. Right now, they cannot.
The oil economy is killing almost every other sector that you find in the Niger Delta.
We have witnessed a clear disruption of a sense of community as we had in our villages and towns. Communities have been basically robbed of their means of survival.
We are tired of this situation. One looking for job, no job, you go out for fishing, you don't get fish. An hungry man is an angry man. So any moment from now, a dangerous thing can happen.
They can shut down oil production in Nigeria. The effect of that on the federal government will be grave. The government will collapse.
Niger Deltans have been talking for years, but when men carried its own weapon, the government is shaking everywhere. So that means the government respects violence, not dialogue.
We have a very repressive government. We have a military that is out to kill. Such a military will go to any length in wiping out communities that occupy a platform and they have it closed down.
We are the Niger Delta soldiers. We are angry that our brother has been killed.
The average Niger Delta is not afraid of death. And if he must die a hero, not a coward. There are different phases of struggle. We are still using dialogue. Let us see if these people will look at things in our view. But if they do not, everybody, even the women, not only the men, even the women will carry weapon. And when it starts, until we have our freedom, we won't stop.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, everybody, to this event entitled Making the Polluter Pay, Environmental Genocide and Just Energy Transition. We were waiting for a few guests. Sorry to be starting a bit later than expected, but I think we'll kick off. So we wanted to begin. I will hand over to my colleagues who will kick off with a cultural opening But welcome. My name's Catherine Nwajaku Dahu, and I'm from the International Working Group on Just Transition. But over to you, colleagues. You can begin the drums.
The other day, we danced in the street. Joy in our hearts, we thought we were free. 3 young folks fell to our left. Countless more fell to our right. Looking up, far from the crowd, we beheld red-hot guns. We thought it was oil, but it was blood. We thought it was oil,
but it was blood.
heart jumping into our mouths, floating on emotion-dry wells. We leapt in fury, knowing it wasn't funny. Then we beheld bright red pools. We thought it was oil,
But it was blood.
we thought it was oil,
But it was blood.
we thought it was oil.
But it was blood.
First the Ogonis, then the Jaws. Who will be killed this next day? We see open mouths, tears don't flow when you are scarred. We stand in pools up to our knees. We thought it was oil,
But it was blood.
we thought it was oil.
But it was blood.
Dry tear bags, polluted streams. Things are real when found in dreams. Behind military shields, evil, horrible, gallows called rigs, drilling our souls. We thought it was oil,
But it was blood.
we thought it was oil.
But it was blood.
The heavens are open over our heads. Toasted dreams in a scrambled sky. 1,000,000 black holes in a burnt-out sky. Their pipes may burst, but our dreams won't burst. We thought it was oil.
But it was blood.
We thought it was oil.
But it was blood.
They may kill all, but the blood will speak. They may gain all, but the soil will rise. We may die and yet stay alive. Placed on the slab, slaughtered by the day, we are the living, long sacrificed. We thought it was oil.
But it was blood.
We thought it was oil.
But it was blood.
You shall know them by the oil stains on their guns and the blood on their hands. They are from the killing fields of the delta, where the sea oozes pollutants at dawn, and the earth is a soggy loam, tired of neglect, unfit for building.
You shall know them by the denomination of the foreign currencies and the oil-stained documents in their golden briefcases. They are experts and bunkers, political hirelings, and cultists.
You shall know them by the badges of rape on their shoulders, soldiers from Odi and other war zones in the Delta. And what is oil without guns? What's petrodollars without blood?
I see them from the sidelines. Soldiers and profiteers, riders to hell, hovering like vultures, waiting for carrion. And what is oil without guns? What's petrodollars without blood?
Tonight, they are circling the sky again, seeking flashpoints of oil deposits. Tonight, they are lost in their greed, waiting for relief by the river bend and a chance to mend their rigs and sing their credo for new crude oil reserves.
And what is oil without guns? What's petrodollars without blood?
in the spirit of the peoples of the Niger Delta, indeed of Africa, our memories, our resistance. We have just listened to performances by colleagues. Nimo Bassi. Nimo Bassi is the Director of Health for Mother Earth Foundation and one of the members of the International Working Group. He presented his poem. We thought it was oil, but it was blood. The second poem is by Professor Ndoka Otiono, Oils and Guns. Professor Otiono is the director of the Institute of African Studies in Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. And he performed his poem with our colleague, Professor Engobo Emese. Professor Emese is the head of the Department of Law at the University of Aberystwyth in the UK. And she's a founding member of the IWG. We acknowledge our drummer, Kabelo Moktla, from the Ladet Koju Foundation. Thank you, Kabelo. By IWG, I mean the International Working Group on Petroleum Pollution and Just Transition in the Niger Delta. My name is Isaac Asume Oswoka. I'm the Director of Social Action International, one of the founding members of the IWG. And so on behalf of the IWG, I want to welcome all of you to this meeting. We are honored to have you here, knowing that this is a very busy week during the climate week here in New York City. We must acknowledge the presence of a king from Nigeria, King Dakolo. We're expecting also His Excellency, the Governor of Bayelsa State, Nigeria, who is on his way here. Today's convening on the theme, Make the Polluter Pay, Environmental Genocide and Just Energy Transition brings art, testimony, scholarship, and policy into one room with a simple message, really. And that message is that the communities that continue to bear the cost of fossil fuel extraction should be part of any process of shaping a post-fossil fuel future. And that polluters, those that are responsible for the historical and continuing pollution of different sites of extraction, should be responsible for the financing of the cleanup, restoration, and of a just transition. The question is, how do we make it happen? Now, because we're in the Ford Foundation and the IWG is existing mostly because of the support of the Ford Foundation, to officially welcome us to this space, I will hand over to Emmanuel Koyole, the Program Officer for Extractive and Climate of the West Africa Office of the Ford Foundation. What do you, Emmanuel?
Thank you very much, Isaac. And as we say in Nigeria, I want to stand on the protocol that he has already established and to welcome all of you to this very important space and a meeting. As we contend a reality, that demand urgent, sustained attention, and especially within the context of energy transition at the moment. The report will be discussed, but I just wanted to say that, we see systematic devastation caused by oil spills, gas flaring, toxic waste dumping, and it's also something that disproportionately affects some communities, in this case, the Bayelsa community, but by extension, the entire Niger Delta, and indeed, communities around the world and ecosystems where fossil fuel extraction has gone on for decades. Bayelsa and the report just takes a little glimpse of this big picture that we are confronted with. But I think one of the important moments that this report and the discussion today present for us is that it's framed within the context of the just energy transition process. And this helps us, to also think of this environmental crisis not just as a climate problem, but as an issue of historical and ongoing justice questing. And so I will urge all of you that the report, even as it will be discussed, that we try and go beyond the report, but to think of solutions and suggestions and recommendations of how communities like Bayelsa and indeed the Niger Delta to ensure that they will not be left behind or stranded, as we say in Nigeria, within the transition process. But also something that beyond the content and the substance of the report, one of the things that I will also urge you to take a look at, and we have been grappling with that within the Ford Foundation, and we coined the terminology glocal, basically meaning how do we pick local issues and connect them globally. I think the work of the International Working Group gives us an example to look at. Because here you have a local issue, in this case Bayelsa, the community's problem, but they have managed to be able to work across different stakeholders, with government, with other NGOs, with experts, both local and international experts. And here we are today, bringing the local issue into the global context for conversation. It is important to look at how this framework can be sustained so that the discussions and the discourse we have at the global level is informed by the realities on the ground and led by the people who most suffer those consequences. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Manuel. Now, to frame our conversation, we will welcome Dr. Catherine Wajako Dahu, a founding member of the IWG. Catherine is the Director of Governance in ODI Global UK and was the chair of the expert working group of the Bayelsa State Oil and Environmental Commission that produced the report. Catherine will be presenting key findings of the Bayelsa Commission report and why the IWG exists and the growing international collaboration behind today's agenda. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Isaac, and welcome again to everybody. Before I begin my short presentation, I just want to say a word of thanks to the Ford Foundation, not just for supporting the emergence of the International Working Group on Petroleum Pollution and Just Transition that today has its inaugural moment, but because of their steadfast support for the work to raise the profile and to shine a spotlight on questions of environmental justice and pollution in the Niger Delta. In 1998, so 97, my first encounter with Ford and also Oronto Douglas, who was the founding father, if you like, of the movement for environmental justice, one of them in the Niger Delta. Ford Foundation hosted a meeting when I was doing another job and an encounter in their offices in Lagos. And that was the beginning of my journey into understanding what we're discussing today. Ford Foundation also generously supported some of the research that I did for a PhD, particularly on this issue, particularly on Bayelsa. So the involvement of Ford is to be celebrated, and I really want to acknowledge that here today. So So as Isaac said, I'm Catherine Nwajakudahu. I'm the Director of the Politics and Governance Programme at ODI Global, which is a think tank in London. But beyond that, and why I'm here, is because of my participation in the development, the authoring of the report, the Bielsa State Oil and Environmental Commission report, and I'll talk to you about that. That has led to the creation of this international working group on petroleum pollution and just transition. So what I want to do then is just, we keep on referring to the report. So just to let you know, we have copies of the report in the corner, and this is it. This is the labour of love of some 4 years of digging deep into the situation in Bielsa. We received some over 1,000 pieces of evidence, testimonies across Bielsa State. Bielsa State is one of the main oil-producing states in Nigeria, accounting for some 23% of Nigeria's revenues. And the first wells that started producing oil in commercial quantities were in Bielsa State. And so the importance of Bielsa in this story is not to be underestimated. I also want to say that it was thanks to the generous commitment and support of the Bielsa State government, which I want to acknowledge here, that this report could ever see the light of day. And I think it's a testament to the dedication, the ingenuity of not just this governor, but his predecessor, who set up this International Commission of Inquiry with a view to gathering all the evidence as to what the problem was in Bielsa in particular, and recommending some solutions in terms of regulatory solutions, but also in terms of what is to be done in terms of cleanup and so on. So this report, completed at the height of COVID, I have to add, is something to be really celebrated. I think it's an important body of evidence that was pulled together by an important local actor. So what I'll do today is just walk you through the findings, the explanations behind the findings, and then the recommendations. And I will give you a taste of, the rationale then behind the setting up of this international working group on petroleum pollution and just transition. So if you could start showing the slides, please. So what we found, I'm not going to speak directly to the slides because, the story is very eloquently articulated also in the report. But what we found in the case of Bielsa, and which is replicated throughout the Delta, was a series of consequences as the result of 70 years of oil and gas production in Nigeria. Those consequences are social, they're environmental, they're political, and they have deeply affected at a cellular level the lives of Bielsans today. We, as part of our research, we not only gathered evidence from testimonies, but we actually commissioned forensic research, looking at toxicology. We took 1,600 blood samples and tested them in labs, certified labs, to examine the levels of toxicity. And what we found was astounding and gave rise, in fact, to the subtitle of our report, and which appears in the title to this conference, to this convening, which was environmental genocide. It is a very shocking, and before genocide became associated with the predicaments outside in other parts of the world, we were using environmental genocide to describe the extent to which, at a cellular level and a systemic level, the pollution crisis was so blatant in Bielsa. I just want to give you a few killer facts, statistics, which always help to illustrate the scale of the problem. So For every Bielsen, we calculated that there are 1.5 barrels of oil spilled for every single Bielsen. You know, this poem, I thought it was oil, but it was blood. My colleagues will speak to that later, but if you imagine that the systemic nature of pollution, it's not just a drip, drip, drip of an oil leak, but it is consistent. It's not an oil spill accident, of which there are some, but there is we noted a systemic problem of poor infrastructure, poorly regulated and managed infrastructure that really is at the heart of the problem that we face. We also note that the response to spill is often long in coming, if existent at all, and that this crisis, what we call environmental genocide, is actually preventable if there was an adequate response. I also want to note that, especially here in North America, that Bielsa has experienced the equivalent of the Exxon Valdez oil spill 10 to 15 times over in terms of quantum volume over a 50-year period. So we know, if some of you will recall, how devastating that Exxon Valdez oil spill was and the level of funds that were put into addressing what remains a problem. So, you know, for Exxon Valdez, you had 11 million gallons of oil spilled. And in Bielsa, you have between 110 and 165 million gallons of oil spilled, and with a very different kind of response. So, you know, just that's to give you a sense. You can change the slide. That's to give you a sense of the scale of the problem. In our report, what we wanted to do was not just look at the facts, you know, what it looks like, but we also wanted to try and unpack why. Why is it that we, in 2025, have an urgent, systemic environmental crisis of genocidal, what we're calling genocidal proportions? And there's a lot of documented, you know, scientific research that speaks to the toxic consequences of consistent oil spill and gas flaring. There's so many different kinds of pollution that we're witnessing, and also the effect on human health. So we believe that kind of terminology is justifiable. I just want to say something a little bit about the toxic impact. So as I said, we commissioned some forensic research and did toxicology studies, and we found, just something also I'd like you to take away, we found that the levels of metals, dangerous metals, evident in people's blood and the soil are 1,000 times over WHO limits. That's present in groundwater, which goes into the whole food system and so on. So we're looking at something quite devastating. And I'll just point you to, yes, the whys there. So we believed, and this is kind of the way the report was structured, that there is a failure of strategy, there's a failure of response, there's a failure of prevention, and there's a failure of remediation. So, you know, just to give you a sense that all the problems that we were witnessing are actually preventable if there was a different approach taken. So just maybe I'll urge you to read the report, and we go into a lot of depth in terms of failures. But in order to save us some time, let me just go quickly to the conclusions. So in the report, we make 10 recommendations. Easy number to remember, 10. And those recommendations are to do with, they're here, you can see them, I'm not going to go through them, but what we believe to be necessary at a local level, at a national level, and an international level. An important number that's now often quoted is a figure of $12 billion. And many say that it's underestimated. It's largely insufficient, but we did our costing as best we could with the modelling that was transparent and could be looked at. We suggest that it's going to cost 12 billion at the very minimum to clean up the pollution in in Bielsa. Bielsa State is just one of 8 in Bielsa State. And that when we're talking clean up, we're talking about clean up, restoration, remediation. And that 12 billion over 12 years. It's a conservative figure, many argue, but that's what we're asking for. We also believe that we need to have there's an infrastructure, an institutional infrastructure that needs to be put in place to allow that to happen. But we fundamentally, and this is the big takeaway, we fundamentally believe that it is for the oil companies who have had the operating licenses and who legally, whatever has been said about, sabotage and the rest of it, we go into a lot of detail in terms of that narrative, but they still have the legal obligation to clean up the mess. And I just want to finish by saying that we wrote the report between 2019 and 2023. We launched it in the House of Lords in the UK, and we presented it to the Bielsa State government, who received it last year, November. Since then, quite a lot has happened. So any close watchers of the Niger Delta, of Nigeria, will know that in January last year, this year, it was announced that the main oil-producing company, Shell, which is presence in Nigeria is older than the Nigerian state itself, was divesting. The report discusses precedents for this divestment, but the divestment that started being discussed or in the public domain in January was a divestment of a different kind, where Shell was selling off the shares in its subsidiary company. So the idea, even though divestment, this is US Climate Week, divestment has a fuzzy edge to it. We imagine that divestment means transition, energy transition, something good, necessary. But in Nigeria's case, divestment is really about shifting from exhausted onshore production of some 70 years to offshore, more profitable, deep water production where companies now have the technology to do that. So we're not talking about a shift in business model, but we're talking about shifting the selling off assets to local companies. We can discuss what that actually means, and selling off liabilities for environmental damage of 70 years to companies ill-equipped to actually deal with it. So we're in a problem space here right now, because we've spent all our time and our intellectual energy, took people's blood, did the work, said, okay, here's the bill, but who's going to pay for it? And so that's the problem we're in. And so the International Working Group on petroleum pollution and just transition is really one set up to ensure that those 10 recommendations actually see the light of day, and that there is pressure built up nationally and internationally to try and deal with them. But secondly, that we start to myth bust around what divestment is, changing the narrative, ensuring that we start to cost. I'm going to stop in a minute. I can talk. You see. We're going to cost clean up, and we're going to integrate it into the valuation of assets of companies, so that justice is really part of the transition. Thank you. I think that's enough for now. I want to now, what's next? I want to hand over to the next segment of this conversation and invite some, as I said, we took lots of testimonies, but here we have some people from Bielsa. We have His Royal Majesty, King Dakolo, who will come forward and give his own testimony of what I've described actually looks and feels like on the day-to-day. And we'll also have MM Okon, who will also give us, MM is the founder and chief executive of Kebakache Women's Development Resource Center. And she will also give you a testimony from the work, her years of work on this subject with women in the Delta, in Bielsa and beyond, about what it actually feels like to be in a context, living the reality of environmental genocide today. Okay, over to you, King Tekwila, if you could come up to the podium.
His Royal Majesty King Bubaraye Dakolo is the Ibenana Way of Ekwetema Kingdom, and he is the chair of the Bielsa State Council of Traditional Rulers. Also a prolific author. We have a lot of his books on display here. Your Majesty, sir.
Good morning, everyone. I believe the position is okay. Yeah, 10 minutes. Yeah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, professors and all, and the Bielsa State Government representatives, and then Ford Foundation that has made this possible. I'm just wondering what exactly to say today when companies like Shell, the international oil and gas corporations in Nigeria, are running away. Some call it divestment, but they are actually running away. Some have run away reasonably without letting us know when and how. And that is frightful. So, what do I have to say when there is a whole report that is right in this hall, and we are here in New York to talk about oil and gas pollution in the Niger Delta, what we experience every day? I'm going to run you through a bit, an excerpt, so to speak, a short passage from my book, my latest book, titled The Kingfisher, an intimate portrait of environmental injustice in the Niger Delta, eventually. On the first day of January 2022, my children were so concerned that Dorothy and Yela asked me what will have been the fate of the Kingfisher if I had not left a pipe, a PVC pipe, 6-inch PVC pipe, in the concrete ceiling of our home. Because the chicks were chirping above the kitchen, because the Kingfisher has found that place as its maternity. So the Kingfisher has been breeding there for the last 10 years. When I was born at the Tuabage, where the first oil well was drilled in the 60s, the Kingfisher was everywhere, and it used to breed at the River Non. By the cliff of the river, it will burrow into tiny holes and then nest there, away from predators, from human beings, away from snakes and hawks and all. But over the years, oil and gas pollution in the last 70 years has continued to smear on that cliff, so much so that the Kingfisher does not feel safe burrowing through crude oil, through mud to go and nest and breed. And so it found a hole in my concrete ceiling and considered it safe enough to breed. And so when my children asked this question, I said it was time to discuss our environment. So we went under a coconut tree and we sat down, and I started telling them everything. The coconut tree is there in the middle of an islet in a small pond. So there's a small islet in a small pond in the palace. And so what we came out with is this book titled The Kingfisher. I'm just going to read a little segment of it, and I believe it will paint a picture of what the voiceless inhabitants of the Niger Delta, particularly Bayelsa State, are suffering from. Enters the mighty eagle. As I geared up to further discuss the intricacies of oil prices, a nearby gas flare, the most intimidating and polluting one, erupted and with unprecedented ferocity. Smoke billowed, flames roared, and it seemed as though hell itself had been unleashed before our very eyes. The shock mirrored on my students' faces matched my own. None of us had ever witnessed such a terrifying display. As we pondered whether it might escalate into an inferno consuming everything in its path, including those unable to flee, the deafening noise gradually subsided to a mere hiss before ceasing altogether. Though the fire diminished in size, its menacing glow remained a grimly familiar sight in our region. As I paused, glancing to my left, a majestic fish eagle soared into view from the distance, its wings flapping with regal grace. It seemed to declare, I am the mighty fish eagle, and I will endure. Indeed, survival was paramount, not only for the eagle, but for all life forms. The right to life, enshrined by the United Nations, was sacrosanct. Almost as if choreographed, the eagle swooped down like an arrow, landing on a tall coconut tree overlooking our class. Its piercing gaze, brimming with precision, infused the atmosphere with a sense of reverence. Unfazed by the gas flare, the eagle observed quietly its presence, demanding respect. The garden fell silent. Even the chirping of weaver birds ceased, as if acknowledging the eagle's significance. My students noticed how the garden transformed in the eagle's presence, becoming eerily quiet, yet profoundly peaceful. However, our reverie was short-lived. The tranquility shattered as a swarm of honeybees, not bumblebees, emerged from the nearby forest. Their buzzing filling the air. Who would willingly face death by fire when there was an alternative? My friends, did you know that decades ago, this swarm wouldn't be considered a swarm at all? Even just 4 decades ago, they would have been a true swarm, filling the morning sky with countless thousands, obscuring the sun in a manner some might interpret as divine vexation, perhaps from the deity responsible for forest harmony, dismissed by geographers as a solar eclipse. How mistaken they will have been. Yet, after 7 decades of heedlessly assaulting the ecosystem with noxious hydrocarbons, the swarm, though not quite resembling one to me, excited my students more than the majestic eagle. I sensed their young minds influenced by our paradise, where they've lived for over a decade, spinning thoughts. Fortunately, as if showcasing their innate traits, the honeybees settled near the hollow of an opopa tree, forming a bulging black bulb of about 3,000 bees. The mesmerizing buzz ceased instantly, as if saying, we've come to join the masterclass to highlight this priceless, non-violent protest against environmental injustice to the Niger Delta people and the underprivileged masses worldwide. It echoed the sentiment, fire on, you are doing great. Little drops of water make the mighty ocean. Suddenly, an age-old solidarity song emerged from a distance appropriately titled From a Distance by Betty Midler. From a distance, the world looks blue and green, and the snow-capped mountains white. From a distance, the ocean meets the stream, and the eagle takes to flight. From a distance, there is harmony, and it echoes through the land, its voice of hope. It's the voice of hope, it's the voice of peace, and so on and so forth. As I finished humming along, another song began. Its smooth and assertive tone, reminiscent of a declaratory oath for initiates of a higher calling. It echoed through our paradise on that New Year's Day. Pagbeo, 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 pagbeo. More, come and defend your name, Nanaway. Come and defend your name, O Lord. They are trying to put me down. Oh, Izoimbe, we are one. The song flowed smoothly, so much so that it could only have been performed by someone with the stage name Barrister Smoot. It seemed that everyone present, my students, the insects, the fish in the pond, and the birds in the air enjoyed this impromptu musical interlude, remaining as attentive as they could be. Now that is the passage. Now this goes to say that oil and gas exploitation or misexploitation in the Niger Delta of Nigeria has affected beyond human beings, snakes, wild animals of all types, insects, the kingfisher, and all. They are voiceless. They cannot attend a seminar. They cannot organize a protest. They cannot write a book. And we believe that someday, these voiceless, which may actually include some of us, should find their voice. Perhaps today, or someday in the future. I predict that the kingfisher will find its voice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me introduce you. Come on, go forward. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that very wonderful presentation of what it feels like in Bayelsa. I want to now hand over to our next speaker, Okon, founder and executive director of Kebekache Women and Development Resource Center, who's been a promoter of social justice and women's leadership for many years. She's conducted research and been part of social mobilization in communities affected by oil and gas. Over to you,
Thank you very much, Dr. Catherine. Your Excellency, the Governor of Bayelsa State, and all the delegates from Bayelsa State, Dr. Chichi, head of Ford West Africa office, I thought she was here, and Mr. Emmanuel, who I directly work with, because Kebekase is one of the Bill grantees of Ford Foundation, members of the International Working Group, ladies and gentlemen. So I will share the experience of women in the Niger Delta, particularly the women I work with in Bayelsa State, their experiences. In my place, when we were growing up and you want to tell stories, particularly tales by moonlight, we will say, Ekonke, and the people will answer, Nke Kongobasi. I know I have limited time, but the stories of the Niger Delta, as represented in the report of the Bayelsa Oil and Environment Commission. What is there in that report? The women suffer triple of that, because what happens to the men affects the women. What happens to the children affects the women. And then what happens to the women is extra burden. And it is also important to note that the woman is critical in the family, in the community, and the entire society. Even when we complain about the exclusion of women from decision-making processes, you will still recognize the fact that the woman play a key role. Do not recognize. Because the woman nurtures the baby, carries the baby in the womb, nurtures the baby, and they grow up to be the men that occupy the big offices. So the first leader is the woman. And that should be recognized. Now, the problem here with the pollution is that pollution has affected the womb. And when pollution has affected the womb, it has affected everything. This should be taken seriously. Women interact more with the environment. They process the food, most of the food we eat. They engage with the seafood in the water bodies. They are the ones doing the subsistence farming. Many of us buy corn along East-West Road and other things. What does this mean? That the hydrocarbon, the petroleum, is also processed when women are interacting, when they are playing these roles. And through these processes, they contact the petroleum. So scientific research, such as was conducted by the Commission, has revealed that many community members now have hydrocarbon, aromatic polycyclic hydrocarbon, total petroleum hydrocarbon. We now carry it in our bloodstream. It may not be only those that were tested. Kebedkase, in our research, we tested 80 women in Otuabagi community. The Commission tested over 1,600 community members. The results showed that we all have hydrocarbon, and something needs to be done urgently. Many people are experiencing all kinds of ailments. I said there is a problem with the womb. Many women are experiencing early menopause. Many women are having fertility issues. And when this happens, people don't create linkages with pollution. There are other interpretations and narrative around the fact that a woman is married and is having challenges conceiving. We need to begin to create the linkages between these challenges and the health of women. It's also affecting the men. So there is a crisis. And those who have the responsibility and the resources to take action needs to take action now. These stories are told everywhere we go. every conferences we attend, every workshop we attend, every panel that we sit in, we talk about the effect of pollution on the people of the Niger Delta, particularly the community women. And we will keep talking about it because people are dying. People are dropping dead. Life expectancy is put at less than 45 years. And that is a huge cause for concern. Gas flaring corrodes the roof, causes acid rain. Growing up, we used to enjoy playing when it rains. But now we can no longer do that. Growing up, our grandmothers used to prefer drinking water from the rain, water that they harvest from the rain. But now, it is dangerous to try that. Something has to be done. There is no access to clean drinking water. We all drink polluted water, except those who have the means to get clean water. So I am here sharing this experience that our mothers are not happy, the grandmothers are not happy. Sometime last year, I think it was last year, at a fourth grantee convening in Abuja, Dr. Chichi said something about the role of grandmothers. When we discuss these issues, we should note that the grandmothers are sad. They are not happy. The mothers are not happy. And that is because their children are dying. The families are collapsing. The society is in trouble because of oil. And when we talk about compensation, which also forms part of the recommendation to have a compensation scheme, people say, why do they always ask for money? In an interview, I was asked, why is it that all the complaint people are asking for money? And I said, why shouldn't community members ask for money? Is money not generated from the oil economy? And why are they not getting it? The people are poor. Otrabagi, where the first oil well is located, there is nothing showing civilization. The oil has been taken. The corporations have moved on. They just walked away. I understand that none of those abandoned wells in Otrabagi were decommissioned. Why shouldn't they be decommissioned? People live with pollution. The entire community is polluted. And we think people should not complain. And then the divestment. They just decided that they are divesting because communities are the ones causing the pollution. And we smile and allow them to go. But the communities are not happy. I don't know who was consulted. The women were not consulted. Communities are working were not consulted. So it is criminal for people to cause the level of pollution and damages in the communities in the Niger Delta, and then they carry their briefcases and move out of the communities and go deeper into the sea to continue their business, because community members will not be able to reach them to say, come and clean up the mess that you have caused in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, MM. And sorry to cut you short. I'd like to recognize and welcome our Bielsa delegation. We have our Governor Duyediri, who has just arrived, so I want to acknowledge him and thank him. You missed what I said at the beginning, which was to acknowledge the efforts and the commitment that you have made to allowing us to do the work that led to this report. So I want to thank you and welcome you today. Thank you. So we've heard some amazing testimonies. We will be having a panel session, but there is in the program a break, but we're not going to take a break because we lost a bit of time. I just want to tell you there's some coffee and tea and refreshments out there. So if you need to take them, please feel free during the course of today's event. But I'm not going to stop. So I want now to move swiftly on because we have a lot to do still. And I would like to welcome our panelists for the panel session. And let me begin by asking them all to come up. We have Professor Anthony Bebbington. Tony, will you please come and take a seat? We also have Reverend Dr. Nimo Bassi. Will you come and please take a seat? Professor Ngobo Emese, please come and join. Mr. Alex Dukas, please come and join them. Lanres Suraju, please have a seat. And I think that's it. I was hoping that Ariel, there's no Ariel in the house? Okay. This will be our panel. And you can sit wherever you feel comfortable. Go ahead. Super. Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for agreeing to be on the panel and just say that we are using this panel to dig in a little bit deeper. There will be an opportunity for questions. So please prepare some questions to put to our panelists. Before continuing, however, I just wanted to say that, if you want to share anything that we're doing today on social media, please do so. I think there's some details on the sheet that you've been given. We're using for LinkedIn hashtag Justice for Bielsa, hashtag Climate Week NYC, and hashtag Just Clean Up IWG. IWG being the International Working Group on Petroleum Pollution and Just Transition. So let me introduce briefly our guest. You'll see that we have a bio sheet that you've all been given. So I'll be quite quick. So our first guest, Professor Anthony Bebbington, International Director of Natural Resources and Climate Change here at the Ford Foundation. So we thank you for welcoming us to your house. You're a geographer by training, Higgins Professor of Environment and Society at the Graduate School at Clark, where you're on leave from there, and many other things. But please see the bio. Welcome. He's also joined by Reverend Dr. Nimo Bassi, who you already heard in the introductory session. So he is the director of Health of Mother Earth Foundation, a think tank and advocacy organization. He is also an architect, an environmental activist, an author, a poet. What is he not? He was formerly Friends of the Earth International Chair between 2008 and 2012, and was once described by Times Magazine as one of the heroes of the environment. He's received many prizes. Welcome, Nimo. And he is a member of the IWG, the International Working Group, so that is also to be noted. We then have Professor Ngobo Emese, a Bielsan daughter, who is also Professor and Head of Law at the University of Aberystwyth in the UK. She is one of the few black professors in the UK. It's been very documented, and her area of specialism is environmental law. And she's got a doctorate from the Centre of Energy, Petroleum and Mineral Law and Policy in the UK. Welcome, Ngobo. Ngobo is a founding member of the International Working Group, active member of the previous expert working group on the Bielsa Commission. Welcome. And we have also to my, to my left but one, Mr. Alex Ducasse, the director of the Polluter Pays project. He's been described as a bold voice in the environmental and climate action space. You have his bio. He's known for his strategic and visionary thinking, and we're delighted to have him on this panel. He's investing heavily in building international coalitions between people living in different geographies but experiencing the same phenomena, and doing some very powerful work. Welcome, Alex. We also then have Lanre Suraju, Chairman of Human and Environmental Development Agenda Header, a long-standing actor, whistleblower, anti-corruption champion, with background in law, and doing some amazing things currently in terms of taking this to the legal level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you all a question, and I'm going to invite you to be rather succinct. Have like 3 minutes, a bit more, maybe 5 at a push, so that we can get a dynamic conversation going. So I want to begin with you, Tony, if I may. So listening to these testimonies, we heard from we heard from His Royal Majesty King Dakolo. How does this resonate for you in Climate Week, US Climate Week, you know, for Ford Foundation, and what are the implications for how you understand just transition moving forward? Over to you.
Well, thank you for the question. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to the Commission for the report and for all the work done. I should say I have never been to Bielsa. There had been a plan, didn't quite get materialized. And I've only spent 2 days in the Delta. So while in the program this is called Expert Panel, expert I am not. So with that caveat, just a couple of 3 maybe thoughts that try to work towards your question, Catherine. One is that, for me at least, what struck me about those short 2 days in the Delta was this sense that oil is everywhere and nowhere. Like, it's everywhere in the sense that, well, Ed Cashy's photos that were streaming earlier on give that sense of the everywhere nature of oil. It's there in the scent of the air, the sheen on water, wherever that water lies, at least wherever we were traveling. So it's everywhere. But it's also nowhere in the sense that there is no visible relationship in the landscape between the huge volumes of wealth that have been extracted from the region and the region. Obviously, it's not completely nowhere, but it's just a duality that came to mind as I was thinking about what to say. And that in that sense, particularly the sense of nowhere, of that wealth really not being there in the landscape, it's so reminiscent of so many different environments, regions, landscapes, countries where our partners work, where we work with partners. And where I have worked, my own background is primarily in Latin America. And Latin America is replete with territories that were heavily mined and are chronically poor. So that's one reflection. Of course, this is in that sense, the report conveys for me a kind of like a familiar message, and yet an extreme version of that familiar message. The second thing, and I'm moving towards a question, that I take away from the report is that huge wealth that has been taken away on the back of practices of systematic externalization of costs. And those practices are things such as flaring, of allowing leaks, of allowing spills, and practices of corruption. And then in turn, those costs that are externalized do accumulate, not only locally, but they accumulate elsewhere. And as the testimonies have made clear, they accumulate in human bodies, they accumulate in the bodies of biotic life, snakes, kingfishers, insects. They accumulate in the physical environment, particularly in water bodies. They accumulate in the social body, and the consequences of that accumulation in the social body are documented also in the report. The distortion of organizational forms for different reasons and in different ways. And of course, they accumulate in the climate system. So that's a body that goes beyond the region. So that's, for me, a second takeaway, which we know, but the report makes visceral, that externalization is central, has been central to huge wealth accumulation. But that externalization isn't just something that evaporates. Those costs accumulate somewhere else with huge environmental, human, and social consequences. So the implications for just transition, I mean, I guess one of the implications for those thinking about just transition, which is all this room and more, is that this is overwhelming and we can't allow ourselves to be overwhelmed. But that a just transition cannot be based, and these are obvious points, but it can't be based on systematic externalization of costs. It can't be based on the unbridled capture of rents from nature. That it has to involve a different distribution of the benefits that flow, and not just with current generations, but with past generations and future generations. It has to be rights respecting, and it has to be responsibility bearing. We often talk about the rights respecting part of this, and I think we talk sometimes a little less about the responsibility bearing part of just transitions. But the case of the divestment feels like a generous term, but the case of the departure under the cover of night of oil companies, which is not only experienced in the Delta, also elsewhere, is a form of dereliction of duty and dereliction of the bearing of responsibility. So for me, some of the takeaways are, can't be based on externalization, can't be based on unbridled rent capture, has to be rights respecting, has to be responsibility bearing. And then the question is how. The recommendations lay out a lot of that, how. There's a financial component, clearly. There's a litigation component, clearly. And maybe what the report said less, this is my closing thought, is that the how is only likely to happen when there are political incentives for it to happen. Like when there are demands for these different forms of behavior to occur. And in that sense, those demands, it feels to me, have to come from a broader-based recognition in a voting society that this is not acceptable and that things have to be different. But that recognition is going to be born when that voting society sees itself in the arguments for restoration, remedy, and difference. And not only sees this as, and this may be, I'm sure many would disagree with this, but not only see this ultimately as a ethical reason to be motivated, but that they see themselves, we see ourselves in a different way of doing development, and for that reason will also demand different practices. So that's where I want to end up.
Wow, thank you very much. For a non-expert, that was quite an expert exposition of where we need to go. That was great, and I think our colleagues will respond to some of the provocations in terms of what's the politics, what is the political context within which the recommendations can stick. So thank you. I'd like to ask now Animo, you to jump in and to tell us, you've been invested in the struggle for decades. What someone referred to intergenerational challenges, and we've all been, it's been 30 years we've been talking about this. When I heard speak, I hear the frustration. How many more conferences will we go to where we talk about this? So, you've been at it for some time. So, could I ask you, perhaps building on what Anthony has said, to tell us something about what the implications are now for the questions of cleanup, just transition. You're preparing to go to the COP as well, So with that hat on, how do you think we can create some political muscle for taking forward for making everyone own the Niger Delta's problem?
Thanks. That is a very complex question, but I thank you for bringing it up because, when we speak about the Niger Delta, it's like you speak about somewhere out there in space that nobody knows about. Recently, we're speaking with journalists in Lagos, Nigeria, about the Niger Delta situation, and I was shocked at the level of ignorance of the journalists. Journalists were talking with about what is going on just about a few hundreds of kilometers away from Lagos. And then I realized we were speaking in context of the crisis of campaigns, the 30 years of execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa. We were discussing. I realized that many of the journalists were not born by that time. So 30 Ken Saro-Wiwa appears like a very distant ancestor. And so they don't really understand how painful this would be. So I kind of forgave them. So speaking about the Niger Delta situation here, I believe that many of us are already invested in knowing about what is going on, but still, it may sound a bit distant to some people. But is the report by the Bayelsa State Oil and Environment Commission is so clear about the level of horror, the horrible situation. And then you go to, for a long time, I've been in the struggle for more than 3 decades now. So you go to communities and you would have a headache within a few minutes because of the fumes, the hydrocarbon fumes in the air. And then you see kids swimming in polluted water. And you just wonder when you ask them, why are you doing this? Children will tell you, we have no option. We have to recreate, we have to swim, we have to play, and we have to use the environment because the environment is our life. You really see this. And so the urgency of action as indicated by this report is so important. And Bayelsa State, I'm happy the governor is here, Your Excellency. Bayelsa State is one of the most polluted states in the country, in Nigeria, maybe in the world, because there's always an oil spill ongoing somewhere. And then the dumping of toxic waste into water bodies goes on continuously, some in open canals. So you can just stand by and see it flowing by. It's not a thing you have to search for. It's very visible. People want to build fish ponds, and yet they just dig a few inches. I think it's imperial system in the US, so we use inches here. A few feet, a few meters, and then oil comes out because the oil spill was never cleaned up. And so the urgency of the cleanup of the Niger Delta, to me, should begin in Bayelsa State. Because the first oil well was drilled, as MM spoke about this, and these oil wells have not been decommissioned. Recently, I visited oil wells number 1, 2, 3, 6, 12. number 9 also. And most of these first oil wells drilled in the 50s, abandoned in the 1970s, never decommissioned, they're still dripping, they're still leaking oil. And that's why you find hydrocarbon in the blood of community people. And so I am personally highly inflammable. Don't come near me with fire. Or there's blood, there's oil in my blood. I mean, you can't live where we live without having blood. I mean, this is serious. Without having oil in your blood, it's a real tragedy. And so, of all the states, and combined with the impacts of climate change, the fact that Niger Delta itself is subsiding, it's a sinking territory, and the fact that the sea level rise, communities are losing their territory, some are losing so much of maybe infrastructure, buildings. People are pointing at the ocean to say, that's where my father's house was. And you just be wondering, what are you talking about? Well, I can't see anything. But by forensic examination, we're able to, these scenarios are being recreated, but you can't reclaim what is lost in the ocean. So it's time for action. And, you know, for Bayelsa State that is highly riverine, the best way to reach the people with energy is renewable energy. So the just transition is so critical for the Niger Delta and especially for Bayelsa State. You can't wait for the national grid. It's not going to get to communities. So we can have autonomous energy systems. And I think this is where the government should, or Bayelsa State should also invest in. Would Nigeria generally be ready to move away from fossil fuels? That is a big question. I would like to just comment on that briefly before I round up. Recently, at the sidelines of the African Climate Summit in Nairobi, in Addis Ababa,
Yeah.
Nigeria made a move to join the oil and gas, the BOGA, Beyond Oil and Gas, alliance, the fund. They want to join the fund, but at the same time, the government is ramping up oil extraction. They're planning to open new oil wells. Even the oil wells that were closed in Ogoni in 1993 are about to be reopened because we just heard about the report submitted to the president. So everything shows that the government is interested in opening up more oil wells. Now, how do you open up more oil wells when the oil pollution is yet to be dealt with? When Bayelsa State has a pollution of per capita pollution of 1.5 barrels of crude oil, we've not had a single step towards that cleanup. And this is why the beauty of the report and the recommendations, which Catherine brought up today, just to remind us, 10 reports. Number 7 among those reports, those recommendations, is that the state should have a higher role in both regulating and insisting on cleanup. And so our governors should have more role to play in terms of how the environment is being utilized for extractive purposes and to help to recover. And I do think number 1 and 2 of those proposals, of the recommendations, about setting up the Bayelsa Recovery Fund is something I'm hoping I'm going to hear from His Excellency, that today this is really coming to happen. And then setting up the fund for that, that's a very key recommendation, and we are so eager to hear, because this will give hope, not just to Bayelsa State, but to all the states who are impacted in the region. And so many other recommendations, that things that the state government can put on the light to show that this is where we're going, to help us give a sense of hope, because really you can feel very exasperated, 30 years of struggling about the same thing, and yet the hole is getting deeper and deeper. We must come out of it. And I believe that by the government of Bayelsa State setting on the commission that produced this fantastic report. This report to me is much more important than the UNEP report on Ogoni environment, than this Ogoni cleanup. Now we have this report on the Bayelsa environment. There has to be a cleanup process beginning in Bayelsa State. And we can't, unfortunately, I don't think we can wait for Abuja to get it done. So the setting up the agency to oversee this, to prepare for this, and setting up some seed funding for this is so extremely critical. And I'm waiting to applaud that move happening in this room today.
No pressure.
No pressure on the
Thank you very much, Reverend Nimo Bassi. I think you lay out some very useful ways forward, and as the IWG, our commitment is to supporting any endeavor to get those recommendations off the page and into action. So let me turn to you, Professor Ngobo. You, Bielsa daughter, but also a legal luminary. One of the things that Tony said was that, you know, there are a number of strands, possibilities that the report opens up. One is a legal one. So I want to ask you, you know, you oversaw the legal and regulatory aspects of the report, and we appear actually now to be seeing some important movement on legal challenges around climate crimes. I want to ask you what your thoughts are on that, and whether you see scope for justice being done for the Niger Delta through collaborations globally on this issue. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And I like the way you frame the question because it is interesting. Sorry. Yeah, no, thank you. I like the way you frame the question because you talk about climate crimes. And from a legal perspective, that is really important. And it speaks, I think, to the challenge that we have in this space. This, if you like, tug of war between power and accountability. And so in so many ways, what you find is that in Bielsa, in the Niger Delta, as indeed in other jurisdictions, the challenge is around the framing of the impact of oil companies on the environment and what that means. And as a consequence, the mechanisms that are adopted globally in terms of legal instruments to hold these companies to account. So when you say for climate crimes, for instance, in fact, it takes me back to my PhD, because as a daughter of Bielsa, as you say, when I went to do my PhD, which was funded by the Ford Foundation.
Thank you very much.
I picked a topic that brought together environmental issues and criminal law, and I talked about corporate criminal liability, and everyone questioned me like I was a bit sick, like, do you think that would happen? And the question was, are these crimes? Are they really crimes? And a lot of the work that I did then was to talk about how we frame and how framing impacts on our responses. So if we do not frame these serious impacts, these harms as crimes, then of course our response is going to be different as well. And a part of me thinks that yes, there is a lot of progress being made in that space of climate justice, in the sense that we have lots and lots of litigation. Some of the recent cases, for instance, in Switzerland, the case in the Netherlands, Uganda, all of that gives promise, hope to what can be achieved there. But Uganda is on appeal. We still don't know what's going to happen there. And a lot of the successful cases that we have are really around climate washing, rather than the bigger crisis of climate justice.
What do you mean climate washing?
Climate washing in the sense of companies making claims around their climate credentials that are not borne out by the evidence. And so it's provable, it is discrete, and it can be brought to account. But a lot of the bigger questions around holding either governments or companies accountable for the impact of the operations on the causes of climate change, that's a lot more delicate. And I think it speaks to the international governance framework. So what I say is that the international system has binding frameworks for money, for business, for trade, for investment. We find ways to do that. But when it comes to the social impact of that investment, the environmental impacts of those investments, we don't have binding frameworks. So we talk about the UNGP and we hail it. We talk about the OECD guidelines and we hail them. But we know they don't have teeth. The NCPs don't have teeth. So where does the person from the Niger Delta go to seek justice? There were some spaces being opened up internationally through transnational litigation, but the United States, after some time, kind of thought, oh my God, the ATC is going to be problematic, and the Supreme Court shut it down in Kiobel and Shell. And once that space got closed up, we kind of now say, oh, there are spaces in the Netherlands, ACMA, and cases like that. But again, it's very narrow in terms of what is achievable. The UK currently has some spaces around Vedanta and Okpabi where it says, oh yeah, you can hold companies accountable for parent company liability. But then that speaks, first of all, the time it takes. I was involved in the Okpabi case. I gave a witness statement, I think over 10 years ago now. That case is still yet to go to trial. So the amount of time, the amount of resources that is involved in bringing these cases, the evidentiary burden that is required to prove liability, the links with causation and agency, all of that is quite problematic. But the reverse is the case for where countries want to act. So the UNGP opens up spaces for home states to act. And so in the UK, for instance, the UKB8, UK Briberies Act, it's binding. There's a lot of stuff around supply chains that you can easily now bring to account because that's what governments choose to do. So the lack of accountability for corporations isn't because we lack the imagination or the systems or the mechanisms to do so, but that the structures are fundamentally deployed to ensure it does not happen. And therefore, when we talk about coalitions and we talk about collaborations, it's about how we bring to bear these various forces in this room, for instance, to ensure that, one, the idea of thinking about the Delta as a Delta problem. You know, the old divide and rule that the British perfected so well in the days of colonialism, where the Delta thinks of the Delta and the Amazon thinks of the Amazon and Latin America thinks of... That has to stop. And I think that's kind of some of the work that people like polluterpays.org is doing to say, look, we can see very clear systemic approaches being adopted, and whether you're looking at the Niger Delta or any of the other regions, you find that the playbook is the same.
Thank you.
The tactics may be slightly different, but the playbook is the same. And so coalitions have to be built around that. People like Ford Foundation supporting those coalitions to find the funding to perhaps sometimes balance some of these unequal competition between these global institutions and weak communities that sometimes are not able to litigate effectively in some of these spaces that we talk about. So there are opportunities. I can see you wanting me to stop. There are opportunities. It is promising, but I say it's early days. But I think it is possible if we all gather together and kind of understand the dynamics that is at play and say, let's bring all of our evidence to ensure that there is accountability for environmental harms. That is very real. We've heard the testimonies. That is very clear. You don't have to investigate. You don't have to deploy monitors to go monitor the Niger Delta. Just go anywhere. You see there's pollution. And some of the old principles can be brought back to play to ensure that this happens.
Thank you, Professor Ngobe Mese, legal luminary, daughter of Bielsa. I think many of the points you raised are exactly where I wanted Alex to come in now, because Alex Ducasse, Director of Polluter Pays project, is precisely trying to seize the moment and create coalitions to enable different actors in different geographies to learn from each other and be more than the sum of their parts. Alex, can I ask you then, turning to you, can you explain in a simple way, first of all, explain in a simple way why it's important to reconsider and reframe this question of divestment? I think we've been talking about it, and different number of people have been talking about it, but then also, say something about the challenge, that the gauntlet that Professor Ngobo threw down in terms of coalition building and what it's going to take. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you for the generous introduction, the charitable introduction. I think, I'll echo Dr. Bebbington and say, if Dr. Bebbington's not an expert on this agenda, which I would challenge, I'm certainly not. I'm probably the farthest thing from an expert on the Nigerian context. Fortunately, because of many of you in this room, I know a little bit about the history of this issue in the Nigerian context. And I'm going to start with the second part of your question in that context. What I can speak to is the playbook that Professor Emesa referred to. What is the industry doing in different places? How does it look the same? What can we learn from that? And how can we work together to push back against the industry's efforts to assign liability to the public instead of the people who've benefited from extraction? And I'm from Canada. And so one thing I'll just say, let me step back actually for a second. We know that this is a generational fight in Nigeria. We've heard about the extent and the duration of extraction and pollution in the Delta, 70 plus years of commercial production. And I think, the industry playbook has been built in many ways in Nigeria. So, Nigeria is a first of a kind in some respects. The industry's been fighting this battle there. I won't name individual firms, but I do believe that Nigeria is one of the places where industry has built the playbook for other parts of the world and how to address this issue to the benefit of industry and the detriment of the public. And in Canada, where I'm from, just to give you a sense, the estimated liability for conventional and unconventional oil and gas, so we have this, the tar sands, the unconventional extraction in Alberta, a closed door estimate leaked from the regulator in the province of Alberta in 2018 was $260 billion Canadian for cleanup, about half of that conventional, half of that unconventional. And so the numbers, from the BALSA Commission's report are, I think it's referred to in the report as a down payment, the $12 billion. It's not, those are shocking numbers, but they're not, in context, it's a down payment, right? I mean, given the history of extraction in Nigeria, and I guess, where I'm going with some of this is to say, if we can join forces, learn from each other, if we can think about in particular, how do we engage certain parts of the financial sector and the financial system to account for these liabilities in a more meaningful way and get regulators, not only oil and gas regulators, energy regulators, but audit and accounting regulators to think about this in different ways. And we're not going to do it by writing the next big report and telling them it's a problem. We might have to litigate. There are other ways we can reach those actors. But I think, that's a way that we get the systemic impact across the different geographies to really internalize these costs for the oil and gas industry in a way that makes alternative forms of energy more competitive from an investment perspective, and that also hopefully helps enable us to make people who've been affected by this issue whole. And one of the other things I'm going to get to the first part of your question, Catherine, I promise. But the other thing I would say, just to pick up on the thread that we heard, I think first from Dr. Bebbington and also from Nemo and Professor Emesa, we are. This is a politics and power issue, right? And I know, in the context we operate in these days, I won't say anything in particular about, Ford Foundation. It's a touchy subject, right? But that fundamentally what we're talking about is power and politics. And that's true in every jurisdiction we're working in. The reality is a lot of, with due respect to those in the room, there's so much regulatory and political capture in some of these jurisdictions that we're working. I can say that about Canada. I'm from there, and I know that reality. It's about power and politics. And if we don't build power in the way that Dr. Bebbington described, I don't think we can win this fight because industry has deep pockets. They're very powerful. It's probably the most powerful industry on earth, arguably. And if we're not, the example that for me, shouldn't have been shocking but still was, is, we had NUPRIC make a determination about the Shell divestment. I'm coming to the term divestment very briefly.
NUPRIC is the regulatory authority in Nigeria for oil and gas.
Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, exactly. And so as a newcomer, to the Nigerian context in many respects, that was a big victory. NUPRIC was doing its job. It was saying, actually, there has to be some, again, maybe a down payment, some kind of understanding and recognition of the liabilities you're leaving behind before this divestment can proceed. And as we all know, and it was widely reported in the financial press, including the Financial Times, Shell said to the government that we are going to take the investment we're planning to put offshore in oil and gas and go home. We're going to take it away unless you overturn that and allow us to divest. And that is, I mean, I uncharitably, I would describe that as, but I think practically it's economic blackmail. And so how do we build the kind of power that we need to stand up against that, such that we have constituencies that the elected officials are accountable to, so that the next time something like that happens, the decision is different, right? The calculus isn't, well, Shell said they're going to take their money and go home and we can't afford that. The decision is, I'm accountable to these people, and I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my power unless I satisfy their needs. And so I think that's easy to say and complicated to do. But that's what I want to do with our partners in the Nigerian context and other contexts that we're working in. We have to confront that reality from the power and politics perspective. I think I've taken up enough oxygen. I'm not going to talk about divestment except to echo what you said, which is it's a bit weasel wordy, right? Like it's run. I think it was described earlier as running away, right? By King Kolo, they're running away. That's what they're doing. They're dining and dashing, we say, as an idiomatic expression in the U.S. and Canada. They're not paying what they owe. And unlike, very briefly, broader climate liabilities, which we talked about, which are very important to deal with as well, these liabilities are existing legal obligations that companies are obliged to satisfy, right? They're not theoretical. They don't require some new legislation or anything like that. They are a new legal theory, for that matter. They made the mess, they clean it up, right? It's a bedrock principle of environmental justice, environmental law, and it's common sense. So I think we have, it's not enough to have truth on your side, but I do think we have that. And I just want to say how much gratitude I have for the International Working Group and its predecessor, the Bielsa Commission, for the work that you've done, because it's a tremendous gift from an organizing and campaigning and advocacy and power building perspective to have that foundation to build from. And I really, really value that. So thank you.
Excellent. Just before you finish, can you just say something very brief about the other geographies that you have partnerships in?
So Canada and Nigeria, of course, as we've discussed, Australia, the UK, and the wider North Sea. We're doing a little bit there. And then we're starting to do some work, but we're treading carefully and I think moving really deliberately in Brazil. So those are the geographies we're working in, and then we have this transnational work that's more focused on how do we, if we're changing the facts on the ground in these countries and actually making sure that companies pay to clean up instead of what they've historically done, which is, foist those liabilities on the public, how do we translate that into action and recognition in the financial sector that those liabilities are real and they're material? It's not about sustainability, it's not about ESG, those are material liabilities, and it's about our guesstimate globally is that decommissioning and cleanup obligations are the floor, again, we're going to talk about the floor, is probably between $4 to $5 trillion US. And so it's a lot, it's a material amount of money, even for an industry that makes a lot of money.
Thank you very much. And our final panelist, I want to turn to you, Lanre. So Alex said maybe the only option is to take the legal route on this. To test. Can I ask you to tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with respect to this? How is the legal, how have you engaged in light of the, dining and dashing precedent that we spoke of with respect to Shell? What have you been doing? What legal routes have you been exploring? And what are your impressions of, where we are now?
Thank you very much. I think this is really going to also be, I must first comment the governor of Bayelsa State and also the government of Bayelsa State. This is for us, one of the foundations, like Alex said, that really gives us some of the basis that you can challenge some of the authorities and even institute some of the actions. And at the same time, I'm not surprised about what Reverend Nemo actually mentioned with the experience with the journalists in Lagos. It is not only just because some of them were not born 30 years ago, it's because some of them are not actually connected with the issues. As much as the challenges in Niger Delta is connected to other parts of the country, globally as well, but majority of the people are not actually connected with the people of the Niger Delta. They're not seeing the issues, and I don't know. I know you're involved for more than 30 years in the struggle. I mean, even the struggle of the Niger Delta has been for more than 30 years. I remember my first connection with the Niger Delta was when Kensaro, we were being student union with Asume Isaac and the rest of that. But when Kensaro, we were actually moved for the boycott of the June 12th election, which was the popular election of the disengagement of the military from Nigeria at that time. So some of us became also conscious and associated with what was happening in the Niger Delta. But as much as I want to also commend the governor, it is also the challenge of the state. The civil society is only assisting and trying to push. I beyond the Bayelsa report, I remember one of our mutual friends, myself and the governor, Honorable Kayode Oladele, actually said, "Oh, you know, Larry, you've actually been on with this. My friend is the governor. How do you want to support the process?" And I reached out and he facilitated a meeting with your deputy governor on how we can use the state, including even challenging the state and claiming that the state is also negligent on some of those things. And this is not an indictment on the state alone, but is also using the power of the state to actually leverage on that and hold responsible and accountable some of the operators. And I remember we were talking also in York earlier this year. And part of the thing that I mentioned was also about King Dakolo mobilizing the traditional institutions across Nigeria, also to leverage on their connection with the community to start mobilizing and galvanizing that. You know, it is not just about Niger Delta problem. It is not just about Niger Delta issue. It is not just only about Bayelsa. Even the resources that are meant to go to the ordinary people are being used to remediate the atrocities that are left with the communities in the Niger Delta and the rest of that. And that is where we're able to, like Alex said, engage with the NUPRC. And that gave us that window of opportunity where it came up with the divestment framework that we're using to hold the companies accountable. Mr. Governor, we're also angry with you, I should also say. You hosted both Ohando and Renaissance and said they are welcome. They are not welcome in the Niger Delta. There's no divestment. What they have done is just to change many of the staff of Shell and ENI don't even know that anything changed. They only closed the net before as Shell official, resumed the next morning as Renaissance official. So there's nothing that has actually changed.
Can I ask you on that particular question? I know that HEDA, the organization that you head, was responsible for putting forward a legal challenge to that sale, the Shell sale in particular. And I want you just to talk us through it and just explain where we are now.
Yeah, thank you. Because part of the thing that was very clear on the divestment angle was that framework, which is actually developed from the PIA, which is a law of the land. It gave NUPLC the power to come up with that regulation, and the companies must respect it. Shell, in its usual audacity, running away. I won't say divestment again. I must stop that using that word. It's not right. In its bid to run away, decided to transform itself from Shell to Renaissance. And in that audacious way, it was giving Renaissance 70% of what it was going to use to buy Shell. And Renaissance was to go and borrow additional 30% from the bank. So Renaissance was not bringing a dime. The people, and they were former officials of Shell. So as part of our engagement with NUPRC knew that Shell had an agenda because it has captured the state, it has captured the authorities, and decided not to assess the proposal by itself. Rather, it contracted some international consulting organization. And they came back and said, you can't give it to Shell. This is really ridiculous. This is an insult to a state for Shell to have actually made this proposal and succeed with it. And on that ground, NUPRC wrote and said, we're not going to approve it. And then Shell went to bring his international bosses to come and threaten Nigeria with the withdrawal of his $15 billion investment in Nigeria, which was what made the president, now it was not the regulator again, it came from the political head to now give the approval for Shell to sell to Renaissance. That for us was the basis for us enough under the framework to challenge it legally.
Right.
And that was why we've gone to court and said the president does not have that power to do that. There's been no justification for the reversal of the decision of NUPRC from original rejection, and Shell has not proven to have done anything different. Actually, there was an attempt for Shell to muzzle the NUPRC by officially issuing a statement and saying, Nigerian government has approved it. We were in Boston, and we did all this thing, and we forced NUPRC to issue a statement and said, no, we never approved. If we approve, we're actually going to announce that. So that was at the point when they saw that there was that influence.
So where is the case now?
The case is in court now. I mean, Shell, Renaissance has said, no, the court does not have jurisdiction. Shell does not have said the court does not have jurisdiction, but currently the court has assumed jurisdiction, and we're challenging them to come and provide evidence of meeting the conditions under the framework, which the PIA has empowered the NUPRC to set up. So now we might still succeed in actually reversing that. It will take us to the Supreme Court and to any other level that we can, including the ECOWAS Court.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So no one is sitting and watching. I mean, I think that there's been so much said by the panel, but I know we're slightly over time, but I did want to open up the possibility of a couple of questions. I'm going to take 3. I'll hear them all, and if you could keep them quite brief so we'll have a chance to get people to answer, and then we'll wrap up the panel. Sir, can I come to you? Can I have a mic for this gentleman, please? There's a roving mic. It's just here in the front. If you could just say your name and briefly. It's on.
Okay, my name is Nimi Waraboko. I'm the director of the African Studies Center at Boston University and also a professor of social and economic ethics. I want to ask a question, it's a legal question to answer. What Shell did, they can get away with it, because before I went to academics, I was an investment banker here on Wall Street, and we faced a similar situation with the railways. So in the past, the railway would use wood in between the stuff, and they were treating it, and it polluted the environment. So then a big railway company, I won't mention them, they sold off the company, just as Shell did. And then when the problem started, the community and so sued. They went beyond the company that bought it and sued the original railway company for originally producing that. Unfortunately, at that time, I was an expert on valuation. How do you make sale? All the M&A, all the stuff. And I produced a model. But of course, at that time on Wall Street, I was advising the railway company how to bypass by using financial theory and modeling.
Very interesting.
And this is real financial theory and modeling. But we're able to force, eventually they settled out of court. But my point of bringing it here is not, because I know the kind of financial modeling argument, stock market argument that they will present, because that's what I did for a living in assessing that. But my point is that the law, or a lawyer found out that by selling off the company does not relieve you of that problem. And this is exactly what Shell is going to do. This was in the US. Unfortunately, that was 1998, 1999. So I learned all this. I went back to Nigeria to work. I wrote the first book in Nigerian on financial statement analysis and valuation, just to know how these things are being done. This was published in 93 and 94. So the question I'm asking here is simple one. Shell has done what is, but in the US, there is part of the law that enables lawyers to go to the original polluter, especially if you are deep-pocketed. I'm saying, does that law exist in Nigeria for us to do, so that we can go beyond the nonsense they are doing and actually says, you know what, you are not free of the liability, you can sell it to wood. And that is the question that lawyers in Nigeria can answer. I know the financial side of doing that, but not the legal side of taking them to court.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wariboko, and we'll probably follow up with you now that you seem to have seen the light. But thank you very much. We'll get our colleagues to answer that question in a minute. Can I ask the lady at the back, please?
Thank you so much, and thanks for the invitation. My name is Natalia Green. I'm from Ecuador. I'm from the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. And I just want to say, well, thank you for the panel talking about the same playbook. I'm looking at the report, listening to what you're saying, and it's exactly what is happening in Ecuador. As you know, we've been struggling and fighting against Chevron Texaco for more than 2 decades. Chevron has said that they'd rather pay in their lawyers like all their money instead of coming and like repairing the territory and what has been left of that oil spill and everything that has happened. So I see that is like exactly the same case. Fortunately, in Ecuador, we've had cases like the gas flares where we like these 9 girls who have either cancer themselves or their family went to court, won a case, and we are now trying to like turn off the gas flares. We've also in Ecuador been able to leave the oil underground, and Nimo, you've been such a defender of the Yasuni, to leave the oil underground, and now we're trying to uphold that decision of the Ecuadorian people. But my question here is like talking about the just transition and having that amazing panel of like making the polluters pay. My question is regarding what should they pay for? Is it only like a compensation for the people? Because when you have, this happens every time in Ecuador, there's an oil spill. We have an oil spill every once or twice every week. The company just comes and like does like a really like superficial reparation. But what happens to nature? Like all the sediments go to the ground. There's not really like an integral reparation. And what we're aiming for is that nature doesn't care for money. We need to do like an integral restoration of the ecosystem. That is the real reason how people can maintain their ecosystem. So are you considering in this like idea of like making polluters pay not only a compensation or just compensation for the people, but an integral restoration to nature? That is what we're working actually with Nemo on the Rights of Nature movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that comment and question. So I'll take one last one. Okay, two. Two last ones. Okay, over to you, and then.
I wanted to, Daphne Weisham. I'm on the board of Friends of the Earth Nigeria, and also working on a concept here in the U.S. That we call fossil fuel risk bonds, which is essentially forcing the polluter to post a bond up front as a contingency of doing business in a particular jurisdiction, and thereby internalizing the costs that the professor was mentioning, so that they have an incentive to actually do the right thing. And if they do the wrong thing, then you can withdraw from that fund. Now, we've gotten it in place in Washington State. We're in the process of putting it in place in Oregon. Right now, what we're dealing with is seismic risks, primarily because we are overdue for a 9.0 earthquake in the Pacific Northwest. But it's a way of beginning the conversation around polluter pays, taking the cost away from the public sector, because we know they will declare bankruptcy when the big one hits, and saying, we will, if you have not hardened your infrastructure to withstand a 9.0, you need to begin a just transition, including decommissioning all of your existing infrastructure. And we have sound constitutional ground, which is the police powers of local elected officials. They have the power to protect the health and safety of their jurisdictional constituents. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a concept that we've written about for Brookings and elsewhere. And I would love to hear if that is being applied anywhere else.
Thank you very much, and nice to see you, Daphne Weisham. I remember your old Niger Delta observer from some time ago, so wonderful that you're here. And over to you. Last question, please.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Professor Adepoye Chembo. Although I'm not a lawyer, I'm into health informatics and health. The one thing that I wanted to add to, I think then when it was mentioned about folks in Lagos not understanding exactly what is going on in the Niger Delta area, I think it's time to take it to the social media. Because right now, That's what we understand in the world, unfortunately. Secondly, I also to provide awareness, to the people, because I understand that is our environment. I want to swim in water, but also consider the consequences. If you do not provide some kind of awareness to the local people in terms of impact, that is contributing more to the problem. Now, my last and probably very controversial question is it possible to sue the government, the state, federal, and local government? Because it is their responsibility to ensure the safety of the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those provocations, questions. Okay, well, I need to wrap this up as well. So I'm going to throw those questions back to the panel. I will ask you to pick the ones that you want to answer. And then whilst you're picking them, say your last closing, what you want to leave people with as we move. So there was a question from our investment banker that was about, this question about liability of the company after the fact, even after they've sold the asset. There's an interesting case on the Ogale Bile in the UK right now, which suggests that historical liabilities still stand, even if Shell has sold to Renaissance. But I'd like to hear from you. So that's the first question. The second question was about the nature of what the ask is. Are we speaking about, are we speaking about compensation? Or are we speaking about, restoration much deeper? I think someone can speak to the recommendations of the report, which lay that out. Then the third question was on the bond idea as a way of preempting the cost that we spoke about, the cost of the just transition, And then finally, this question that was raised about, how do we, plans for broadening awareness and also holding government to account at all the levels, federal, state, and local government. I'd like to, open it up. Lanre, why don't you take a first shot?
Okay, thank you.
And really, you got 1 minute.
Okay. I think the 1 minute should be sufficient to say thank you for listening to me and having me here. But let me just try and borrow additional one to say yes. It's important, and part of the PIA in response to
Petroleum
the
Industry Act.
It actually does not really allow for the company to transfer those liabilities to the buying one, except that you must have made provisions, or the buying company must sign an express agreement to take over those liabilities, which must then provide evidence of taking care of those liabilities. So Shell trying, and this is going to be an interesting one, when we got through freedom of information to the UK government, and we found that the head of Shell, the vice president, met with the UK ambassador to Nigeria, and in the course of the conversation, actually confessed discreetly that they would have to rely on Renaissance to do the cleanup, and assume that Renaissance has the capacity. So so we got that out of freedom of information request by some of our partners in the UK. It was a confidential conversation, and we have the evidence. So Shell knew that it was not planning to take responsibility.
Right.
So these are grounds to actually sue. But like you said, it is possible to sue it, and that's why I was putting the governor on notice, and also members of the House of Assembly, that we will be suing the state to say you are not actually defending the people sufficiently enough. And this is why we want to make sure that they can then hold Shell and other operators in the system. Because once they go away, it is the resources of the state that will be used to clear it. So if the state does not want to continue to live in debt, either political debt, economic debt, or financial debt, then it needs to hold these oil companies
to
accountable.
account. Thank you very much, Larry. I want to invite my sister Ngobo, who wants to come in here with a response, but also what you want people to take away here.
So just on that last point, what I do want to say is that there have been actions, including the one here that did, including the one Serap did, including the one Serac did, trying to hold the Nigerian state to hold the oil companies accountable. And sometimes that also has its own challenges in terms of what you can sue for in those spaces. What I do want to say is that in terms of what the report is asking for from that question, it isn't just about compensation, which is what happens daily. And that's why we talked about the Bielsa Recovery Fund. So a huge part of that is about the remediation and restoration of the environment, because unless the ecological restoration is done, then we're nowhere at all. So that is kind of fundamental. And then on the question around, okay, I'll leave that.
Okay, what do you want to leave people with?
I think what I want to leave people with is that this is a fight that we are all in. I think for me, the more we've discussed the Niger Delta, the report in the context of what everybody else is doing, and being in these rooms, it's reinforced that idea that we've all got to come together about the political, approach, the strategy for doing this, where we leverage, our collective strength, and therefore each one of us must lend a voice to that fight. Otherwise, it becomes David and Goliath situation, which no individual can win, but we can win this fight. And I think the moment is now. I think we've got the moment where there are a lot of different forces coming together that we can win this fight.
Thank you very much. I want to hand over to Alex. You seem eager to.
I'm eager because I want to pick up exactly where you left off, Professor. Which is the only thing I'll say. I'll leave the answering the questions to the doctors and reverends and lawyers and the actual experts on the panel. But I will say this to pick up where that leaves off. You can't squeeze blood from a stone, and the clock is ticking on how long we have to force the industry who's benefited from this extraction, responsible for this pollution, to pay to clean up their mess. Because whether you think it's going to be in 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, the energy transition is happening at a pace and scale now that the oil and gas industry, one thing I do know about is oil and gas industry economics at a sectoral level, they have the money now, they have lots of money now, they are not going to have the money in the future. Once demand starts to drop off by even 3 or 4 million barrels a day, even at the margin, price of oil is going to go down. Right now these guys are giving out dividends, doing share buybacks like they're going out of business, because they kind of are going out of business. And so, now's the time. That's what I would say. And we cannot afford to wait 10, 15, 20 years for a resolution. This is the moment.
Thank you very much, Alex. Nemo, do you want to answer any of the questions, and what are your famous last word?
For today.
For today.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been, I think the recommendations made by Daphne about the posting of bond by oil companies is something that should be taken forward. I
Right.
understand there's a rumor going on in Nigeria that the government is about to amend the Petroleum Industry Act so as to sell off the government holdings to some individuals and companies. So it might be that this could be one of the things brought into the amendment to ensure. But I do know that companies understand the law requires that they decommission and restore at the end of the lifespan, and every oil well has a lifespan. Every mine pit has a lifespan. But these guys just walk away, leaving time bombs all over the Niger Delta and all over the nation by that. So this needs to be done. And the issue of, I think this has been mentioned about are we asking for reparation? Are we asking for compensation? I think that things step by step. There must be remediation, there must be restoration, and there must be reparation. But that's the order it should be. And in fact, the way it is now, unless we begin to do some work right now, some of us may never see a clean Niger Delta in our own lifetime, because the problem is getting more complicated as the days go by. It's really very shocking that we could so much exploit nature, exploit the environment, exploit the region without putting back anything except a few infrastructure and a few things. Whereas what we really need is the restoration of the environment. Otherwise, we've lost it all.
Thank you very much. And it leads me to think of the intervention by King Dakolo about the kingfisher. I'm just thinking about that image of that lack of safety to lay their eggs as really poignant. And over to you, Tony. I want to leave off where we started. So we started with you, we'll end with you. Do you have any reflections on the questions, or what is the last little gem that you want to leave us with?
Well, I had been hoping you'd forget me, but
no.
So 3 quick thoughts, partly related to the question and comments of colleagues here. One is that so if justice is many things, but if it's anything, it's the recognition of the concerns and the rights violations of those with least voice. And in this process, those with least voice are those who have passed. So part of justice is memory. Those who have yet to come. So part of justice is recognizing the inability of future generations to voice their demands and for their rights. And it's also recognizing nature, which also does not have voice. And justice is more than that, but but it is at the very minimum that the recognition of those who have least voice, and those who have passed, those yet to come, and those without a voice. And then 2 gems here, which I think which seem to me really important. The implication of Alex's comment is that successful litigation is also about speeding the transition. It's not just it has a structural accelerating effect in the transition process as well, because of what it implies for financial resources of certain actors, and that, as this room has showed, I think that there are already many links across regions, across experiences, but in those links resides the real part of the real power to move forward in these processes. So your comment about working across all the experiences here in the room seems to me to be absolutely critical.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much. I do think there are opportunities. I'm not going to try and summarize anything. There have been a number of gems. What I do recall was this constant refrain about externalization and internalization of costs. If we're going to move from A to B, there needs to be a shift in terms of internalization of the real cost of extraction, which has got us where we are. I'd like to thank all my panelists, the experts and the not so experts who are actually experts, who gave us an amazingly deep and provocative expose of the problem that we have, but also, I think, a lot of hope for the possibilities that this moment offers us to really accelerate change in the right direction. So I'd like you to join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you. And so I would now like to invite His Excellency, the Governor of Bayelsa State, to join us and make your presentation or your intervention from the podium. Thank you. We're going to allow the Governor
Please be seated, please be seated. Thank you, Catherine. And I'd like to appreciate and acknowledge all of us who are in this room, in particular the International Working Group for what you are doing today, and all the partners for what you are doing today. I don't think that I'm actually here for another address or an intervention. I think what I'm here for really is actually a vote of thanks. And very interesting, my friend Nimi put me on the spot, and I'm sure he's expecting to hear a lot from me on the spot. But it is with profound gratitude that I stand before you here today, representing the good people of Bayelsa State with my team, who have borne the good side of it and the very bad and worse side of oil exploration, exploitation in Nigeria. And as we're all aware, oil was first found in my state at a place called Oloibri. Today, it is also called Otuabagi. And if you go there today, it is a shadow of itself. And that's what made Nigeria an oil-producing country from then on. For decades, Bayelsa has been on the front line of energy production, supplying the oil and gas that power our nation's economy and bolster global energy. Yet, alongside this contribution has come an incalculable cost. Widespread pollution, degraded farmlands, poisoned rivers and creeks, compromised health, and far too many, oftentimes, ruined livelihoods, as we have all witnessed from those who gave testaments today in this hall. The story of Bayelsa is a paradox. Immense natural wealth that should have enriched the commonwealth of the people of the state, set against deep ecological wounds, landscapes scared by oil spills, gas flares, and industrial neglect. For decades, our people have endured and cried out in pain. I would like to specially appreciate the immediate past governor of Bayelsa State, my predecessor, who had the vision of setting up the Bayelsa Oil and Environmental Commission, which we are talking about today. And so I'd like to appreciate and acknowledge Senator Henry Serake Dixon, my immediate predecessor, who took that bold step. And I also want to appreciate the Right Honorable Lord John Sentamu, former Archbishop of the York, and all the members of that commission that worked assiduously to ensure that we have this report today. Their work, grounded in empirical evidence and courageous testimonies, has laid bare the challenges that Bayelsans have endured for decades. The Commission's report does more than documental environmental degradation. It also underscores a profound matter of justice and sets out 10 major recommendations to guide an effective and equitable response. I would now like to bother you with most of those recommendations which we are all aware of. But importantly, like I said today, it's more of a vote of thanks. And I'm sure Nimi and others are waiting for me. What does the governor have to say about the recommendations that actually affect the state? What has the state done about those recommendations? As a state government, we have looked at the report, and as you are aware, we launched that report in London, in the House of Lords, from where we moved it to Bayelsa State and decommissioned the commission, from where we now moved to Abuja. And so when we are talking about decommissioning and decommissioning, we have decommissioned this commission. Unfortunately, all of our oil wells have not been decommissioned. What is fresh in my memory is still that of the ITO oil spill recently, where gas was flowing for weeks and no control. And at the end of the day, what we were told was that the oil field is no longer producing. It was no longer producing, yet it polluted our environment for so long a period. And when the question was asked about decommissioning, clearly that was not decommissioned. And so from 1959, when 57 rather, when oil was first struck, up until now, virtually all the oil wells that are said to be unproducing are still not decommissioned. And so for us in Bayelsa State, at least we have taken a first position by decommissioning the commission. But that's by the way. We are also, as a state government, we looked at this report, and the areas that it affected us as a state government has to do majorly with the agency. And as we speak, there is already a bill before the Bayelsa State House of Assembly. I'm happy the leader of the Bayelsa State House of Assembly is in my entourage and is here with me, Honorable Obolo Monday. And so that will encapsulate also the issues about the financial bits that you mentioned. Because we wanted to give it a legal teeth, a legal framework, so that even when I exit and there is another governor coming in, there will be a legal instrument that will bind the state government. And so all of and most of the issues that you have raised there, including the ones raised by my dear brother and friend Nimi, they are all encapsulated in the bill. And that bill is in the second reading. Leader? It's at committee stage. And so clearly, as soon as that bill is passed, so many other actions will follow. And so I truly, truly am happy and excited that today we have a document that everybody is speaking to. Today, the world is gathered, and we are now coming up as partners of progress in ensuring that our people will not continue to die, in ensuring that our environment will not continue to be polluted, and more importantly, to hold those responsible for polluting the environment. So once again, I want on behalf of the government of Bayelsa State and the good people of the state, appreciate and acknowledge all of us who are gathered here, including those who are not here, to say that we have just started. And like the panelists rightly said, the time is now. And we must do everything within our powers. The power of the people is beyond any government. And we, as a government, we are ready to be sued. As a state government, we are ready to be sued. One of us mentioned that. And I think it will be very good. I know behind the scene, my friend mentioned, we are doing a lot also behind the scene. And whilst we do that behind the scene, we are also doing what we think that as a government we should do, so that our people will have some respite in terms of the environmental degradation, the environmental pollution, and our ecosystem totally almost going. During the last elections, I'm in my second tenure as a governor. And so I'm almost out. I have just about 2 more years to be in that saddle. And during the campaigns, I moved into virtually every nook and corner of the state. And like most of you said here, anywhere you move into, all you continue to inhale is oil. And all you see in the rivers and the rivulets is oil floating. And that's the water that our people drink. And what can a state government alone do in that? No light. We have abundance of gas. But the oil companies will have 24 hours electricity in where they operate. I call it the tale of two cities. And where the communities are is darkness. And most times I also believe that as a state government, like one of the panelists said, we need to do something. So today, I'm also happy to report in this hall that we had to take our destiny into our hands, and we have procured a 60 megawatts gas turbine, because we have gas in excess in Bayelsa. And so the work is going on installing the 60 megawatts gas turbine, which will supply electricity to Bayelsa. And we are going to move off the national grid that is collapsing every other time. And that means that we will have 24 hours electricity supply in the state of Bayelsa. I welcome all of you, and I like to once again appreciate you and acknowledge you for inviting me to this forum. And I am going to report back that what the past governor has started and what we are continuing is actually yielding fruits. Internationally, we now have a voice, particularly with this working group. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and we're delighted to hear about those two resolutions. First, with the bill in committee stage in the House of Assembly, and the second about the supply of electricity in Bayelsa. And I would reiterate the remark I think made earlier by someone about the importance, we're in Climate Week, the importance of considering other forms of production of energy, renewable, given the Niger Delta context as well. So we're coming towards the final part of our event, and so I would like to invite the drummers, they're there, and also my colleagues who are going to recite some poetry to close us off, and to thank you all for being here. But as we began very, very poignantly. I think we need to close poignantly, because we are not certainly out of the woods. So please come up. I think it's Professor Emese and Professor Nduka. It's just one, it's just you. You're in control. I'll sit down. Okay, over to you, Charles.
My poem is I Breathe. It's okay. I breathe to live, to die. I ride in the shadows to the rhythm of the frenzied, booming hiss of the burning night, coating my lungs with a suit of crude, the death knell ringing in my ears as I breathe to live, to die. Spluttering, gasping, I sip from the cup that moistens my scorched tongue. And the fresh fish pepper soup silences the growling in my stomach, unleashing poisons that crawl through my veins as I eat to live, to die. I am the child of the Niger Delta, born where rivers once heaved and danced to the cacophony of sights and sounds, meandering through the rushes of mangroves that breathe life that all might thrive. Now, I inherit only their absence, ghosts whispered by weary mothers and fathers, whose callous hands return empty, with nets cast in poison streams. Who bury tomorrow to buy this price of today? My strange diseases? Mere collateral damage in the fever skirmishes of chess games played in glittering glass towers, where the clinking, the ever-growing clinking, dictates who may live, who must die. The clinking god chooses his winners and losers, and the world bow in anodyne worship to the paper temples of progress. Grow, sacrificing justice at the altar of profit. And here, in the cradle of oil and fire, I live, breathe, to die.
The title of this poem is Homeland Securities. Today, a gray weather camouflages time, and I track the uneasy mangrove swamps from the garden city where poison flowers transfigure into bullets and blood, to Buguma, frightened by the frothing waters as the speedboat churns its way and the innocent water laughs with shy waves, oblivious of the fate that's befalling her. I witnessed new pollutants thicken the sea as a boy ripening sacked the fishermen with their worn-out nets and perfumed the hooded creeks reeking of gunpowder, crystalline salt, and supplicant hostages. Aerial roots of halophytic plants plead for protection from the rippling septic sea as musings from Homeland Securities overwhelm me, lost in my morning sickness. It's dawn in the creeks, and the fear of embittered militants is the beginning of safety. Youths immunized against bullets by Egbesu, faces laced with litanies of and contest the feds' control of nature's honeyed gifts to them. Tenants in their own homeland. You will not dare stare at the amulets tied around their necks, nor question the potency of the warrior spirit. Here are the new faces of Homeland Securities. Ragtag citizens of a country sown with fabrics borrowed from ethnic nationalities like a coat of many colors. The boat cruises with my sailing thoughts as an odd poem yearns to be written on the tablet of the mind. I think of OD, where there are no road signs, but ruthless graffiti in charcoal, chalk, or etched with pinpoint item by an insane army. Weep not, OD. God Almighty is the destroyer of man-made gods. And laugh not, or do so at your own peril, for you will learn the meaning of homeland securities under a leaking green, white-green umbrella in the gathering storm. It's dawn in the creeks, and another news of another kidnap floats through the cobwebbed airwaves as I track the mangrove swamps from Garden City to Buguma. In the Niger Delta, says the newscaster, there's no security, only gangs, guns, and oil. Thank you.
Ken Saro-Wiwa would have been 80 years next month, but his life was cut short 30 years ago. While he was in prison, before he was executed, he wrote a number of poems. And I'm going to read one as a tribute to him, and also to remind us that even in very adverse conditions, we can still retain a sense of humor. He was a man of humor while he was in detention and while he faced very grim consequences. But this poem is very short, and it's a tribute to him. It's titled, Keep Out of Prison. He never came out of the prison. Keep out of prison, he wrote. Don't get arrested anymore. But while the land is ravished and our pure air is poisoned, when streams choke with pollution, silence would be treason, punishable with a term in prison. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Isaac Oswoka, to close us off, and with Emmanuel Purely for the last words. Thank you, everyone.
Listening to that poem by Ken Saro-Wiwa, I'm reminded of what Professor Bebinson said, in the panel, that the situation is overwhelming. At the same time, we cannot afford to be overwhelmed. Today, in Nigeria, the federal government is putting finishing touches to return oil production in Ogoni land. There have been so-called consultation with the people, consultations that are flawed in different respects. And that means that the struggle must continue. Today, we consider it the official launch of the IWG, the International Working Group on Petroleum Pollution and Just Transition in the Niger Delta. However, the IWG has been active for a year already with the generous support of the Ford Foundation. Following the conclusion of the work of the Bielsa Commission, the IWG has been involved, working with other partners, some of core allies in this room, Kebekache, HEDA, and the Political Peace Project here within Nigeria and internationally, putting pressure, even organizing, supporting protests in the cities of the Niger Delta, in Yenagua, in Port Harcourt, protests when we realized that, as Larry pointed out, that President Tinubu was forcing NUPRIC to abandon its recommendations against the sale of Shell's interests in offshore interests in Nigeria. We engaged in engagement. We engaged with even members of the National Assembly, and we got the House of Representatives to issue a resolution calling for a halt to the asset sales. President Tinubu did not respect those, the wishes of our people, nor the resolution of the National Assembly. It was the interests of the United Kingdom and the Netherlands that prevailed at that point in time. States that defend Shell in Nigeria. However, the work is ongoing. We recognize the need to continue to support the building of international coalitions, within Nigeria and internationally. We understand the need as IWG to work with our partners in the universities, and that is why we have organized already. Within the past year, we've organized a workshop in Toronto at York University. We've had a workshop in the UK at the University of Bradford, and that is continuing. We've had meetings with other allies, strategic sessions internationally and within Nigeria to try to build momentum, build resistance against what is happening in the form, of that divestment, and also to reshape the understanding of a just transition. What does it mean? What does it mean? And how do we ensure that the communities at the sites of extraction, their realities are captured in the transition, the energy transition process. The IWG works in four main areas: research, and we have our members in the university systems. Even ODI is a research institution. We're partnering with universities to consolidate evidence, publish accessible findings, and provide the data that government and communities need to drive remediation. There's a legal and justice component, and the IWG is working closely with organizations like HEDA. The IWG is also supporting litigation. Particularly the IWG is supporting the litigation of His Majesty King Dakolo and the Ekpetiama Kingdom against the Nigerian state and Shell concerning the divestment. We also work on health, on health, advancing assessments, screening, and programs that address pollution-related disease while building local health capacity. This is more aspirational. We need to do more in that area. And of course, a major plank of our work is continuing to maintain our communication with the government and people of Bayelsa State to try to do whatever that we can, and to mobilize resources, both institutional resources, to support the Bayelsa State government in advancing the recommendations of the Bayelsa Commission. So we thank everyone for the support, and we want to inform that we have a website that is up and running now. We encourage everyone to just check it out. If that's, I hand over to Emmanuel to close us.
Thank you very much, Isaac. I guess my job is very simple and straightforward, and it's just to thank everyone for coming, particularly the team, Homer, Isaac, the International Working Group, for really putting this together. On the part of Ford, one of the things that was really pushing us also, whilst our primary commitment have been around support to communities and so on, we recognize that, this is not possible if you don't have the government particularly taking the lead on these issues and having, government and states working with citizens in synergy to be able to address some of these very critical issues. And I think for us, one of the lesson and what we are observing keenly from this project and this partnership is really whether this will help to be able to deliver some difference. And on that note, I want to thank Honorable Excellency, the Governor of Bayelsa State, for really playing a very critical role in this, and also having the traditional authority heavily involved, Kindakolo, mobilizing the traditional leaders, because in Africa, when we talk about communities, we're actually also talking about the traditional and the faith leaders. So we are very glad that you are playing a very central role in this. Hopefully this will be a good example to help us to be able, all of us, achieve the ultimate objective, which is that Bayelsa will be clean. The people in the communities will have their livelihoods, not just now, but also for the future. Thank you very much for coming, and I'm sure we're going to meet again.
Thank you, Emmanuel. And thanks to the foundation for providing this space. We've been informed that we will be kicked out of this place in 2 minutes. so I hope that we'll have opportunity, maybe somewhere in the lobby or somewhere just to network.
Yeah, we need to take some photographs.
Yes, we need to take a photograph.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.